My wife said, "I'm tired of pretending I like your mother. Don't invite me to her birthday party." I looked up from the carburetor I was rebuilding in our garage, grease coating my hands like a second skin. Samantha stood in the doorway, her real estate blazer pristine despite the August heat, checking her manicured nails with the same expression she'd used to inspect a cockroach. "Completely understand," I replied, not missing a beat. "I'll make other arrangements." She blinked, clearly expecting a fight. After 15 years of marriage, she'd grown accustomed to my pushback, my desperate attempts to keep our family together. But something had shifted in me over the past few weeks. Maybe it was finding those text messages on her phone. Maybe it was the way she'd started working late every Tuesday and Thursday. Or maybe it was just the slow, grinding realization that the woman I'd married had become someone who could look me in the eye and lie about where she'd been. "Good," she said, already turning away. "I have a showing anyway." "Sure you do," I thought, watching her BMW pull out of our driveway. The same BMW that had been spotted at the Sunset Motel 3 times in the past month, according to Mrs. Yates from across the street. Our neighborhood's unofficial surveillance system had its perks. I wiped my hands on an old shop rag and pulled out my phone. Rachel picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Danny, what's up?" "Random question," I said, keeping my voice casual. "You doing anything Saturday night? Mom's turning 70 and I could use some backup at the dinner." Rachel laughed, that genuine sound I remembered from before her divorce. "Samantha finally admits she can't stand Helen?" "Something like that. Count me in. I'll even wear something that'll make your mother think you traded up." After hanging up, I stood in my garage for a long moment, surrounded by the familiar smell of motor oil and old leather from my boxing gloves hanging on the wall. The gloves Eddie had given me when I was 16, back when I thought I might actually make something of myself in the ring instead of inheriting my father's struggling used car lot. 25 years later, I was still here, still fixing things that other people had broken. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. But maybe it was time to break something myself. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. I picked up Rachel at 6, and she'd kept her promise. The black dress was elegant without being flashy, and when she smiled at me from her apartment doorway, I remembered why half the guys in high school had harbored crushes on her. "You clean up nice, Castellano," she said, adjusting my tie. "When's the last time you wore something without motor oil on it?" "Special occasions only. Don't want to spoil my reputation." The drive to Mom's house took 20 minutes, long enough for Rachel to fill me in on the latest gossip from her job at the bank. She'd always been easy to talk to, even back in high school when she was dating my best friend and I was too shy to admit I thought she was the prettiest girl in our class. "So," she said as we pulled into Mom's driveway, "want to tell me what this is really about?" I shut off the engine and looked at her. "What do you mean by that?" "Danny, I've known you since we were 15. You don't do spontaneous dinner invitations, and you definitely don't do them without telling me why your wife suddenly can't stand your mother." Smart woman. It was one of the things that had attracted me to her back then, and one of the reasons her ex-husband had been an idiot to let her go. "Let's just say I'm tired of pretending about a lot of things," I said. Mom answered the door with a smile that widened considerably when she saw Rachel instead of Samantha. Helen Castellano had never been subtle about her feelings toward my wife, and the fact that I'd brought her former favorite instead was clearly Christmas morning and birthday rolled into one. "Rachel, sweetheart." Mom pulled her into a hug that lasted about 3 times longer than any greeting Samantha had ever received. "You look absolutely stunning." "Happy birthday, Helen. 70 looks good on you." We settled into the dining room where Mom had gone all out with her good china and the wine she'd been saving for special occasions. The conversation flowed easily, touching on Rachel's new apartment, my business, and carefully avoiding the elephant-sized absence at the table. "Danny, pass me your phone," Mom said as we finished dessert. "I want to get some pictures of this beautiful evening." I handed it over, watching as she positioned Rachel and me together, her arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something she'd said about her neighbor's new boyfriend. Mom was thorough, taking shots from multiple angles, making sure the lighting was perfect. "These are lovely," she said, immediately starting to post them to Facebook. "Rachel, you should come to dinner more often. It's so nice to see Danny smile like this." My phone started buzzing before we'd even finished clearing the table. Text after text, each one more frantic than the last. "What the hell is this? Why is Rachel at your mother's house? Answer your goddamn phone. This isn't funny, Danny. Call me back now." I showed the screen to Rachel, who raised an eyebrow. "Wow, she's really losing it." "Good," I said, silencing the phone. "Let her wonder." The calls continued through Sunday morning. 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. I let them pile up while I worked on a 2015 Honda Civic that had been sitting on my lot for 3 weeks. Sometimes the best way to think was with your hands busy and your mind free to wander. Samantha finally showed up at the dealership around noon, her BMW screeching into the parking lot like she was auditioning for a Fast and Furious movie. She stormed across the gravel in heels that had no business being worn anywhere near a car lot, her face flushed with the kind of anger that usually preceded our biggest fights. "What the hell was last night about?" she demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. I didn't look up from the engine compartment. "Mom's birthday dinner. You said you didn't want to go. So you took Rachel." "My Rachel." "Your Rachel?" I finally straightened up, wiping my hands on a shop rag. "I didn't realize you owned her." "Don't be cute, Danny. You know exactly what this looks like." "What does it look like, Sam?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly realizing that any accusation she made would sound hypocritical given her own recent activities. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who'd been sneaking around with Bryce Morrison, the muscle-bound idiot who ran the auto detailing shop downtown, was suddenly concerned about appearances. "It looks like you're trying to make me jealous," she finally said. "Are you? Jealous?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment her mask slipped, and I saw something that might have been genuine emotion flicker across her face, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I'm concerned about what people will think," she said instead. "People like who?" "Bryce." Her face went white. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. Just wondering which people's opinions matter to you these days." I turned back to the Honda, effectively dismissing her. After a moment, I heard her heels clicking back across the gravel, followed by the slam of her car door and the squeal of tires as she peeled out of the lot. Eddie found me there an hour later, still tinkering with the same engine, even though I'd already identified and fixed the problem. "Heard you caused quite a stir last night," he said, settling his considerable bulk against the workbench. At 55, Eddie Torino still looked like he could go 10 rounds with guys half his age, which was exactly the kind of reputation that kept his gym profitable and his fighters disciplined. "News travels fast in this town. Your mother-in-law posted about 15 pictures on Facebook. Half the neighborhood's seen them by now." He paused, studying my face. "Want to tell me what's really going on?" Eddie had been my trainer, mentor, and closest friend since I was 16 years old. If anyone deserved the truth, it was him. "Samantha's having an affair," I said simply. "With Morrison?" I looked up, surprised. "You know?" "Kid's been bragging about it at Murphy's bar for weeks, talking about how he's showing some married woman what a real man can do." Eddie's expression darkened. "Didn't know it was your wife until yesterday." The rage that swept through me was so sudden and intense that I had to grip the edge of the workbench to keep from putting my fist through something. Morrison had been bragging about my wife to half the town while I'd been playing the oblivious husband. "How many people know?" I asked. "Enough. But most folks have been keeping quiet out of respect for you." Respect. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. They all knew, and they were all watching, waiting to see what poor Danny Castellano would do when he finally figured out his wife was screwing around. "So what's the plan?" Eddie asked. "You going to confront her?" "I'm thinking about it." "Thinking's good. Acting stupid isn't." He pushed himself off the workbench. "You need to blow off some steam. Come by the gym. Punching bag's better than punching Morrison, at least legally speaking." After Eddie left, I sat in my office and stared at the stack of unpaid invoices on my desk. The car lot was barely breaking even, had been for years. Samantha's real estate income kept us afloat, gave her the leverage to treat me like a kept man who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw my way. But maybe it was time to remind her that even kept men had teeth. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through her social media accounts. Samantha was careful, but she wasn't perfect. The photos from her work dinner last Tuesday showed her at Romano's, the expensive Italian place across town. The timestamp said 8:30 p.m. The credit card statement I'd checked that morning showed a charge at the Sunset Motel at 9:45 p.m. Quick dinner. I started making a list of dates, times, and inconsistencies. If Samantha wanted to play games, I'd make sure I understood the rules first. My phone rang, interrupting my detective work. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," I said, answering on the second ring. "Hey yourself, I just got the strangest call from Samantha." "Oh?" "She wanted to know if we were sleeping together." Rachel's voice carried a note of amusement. I told her that was an interesting question coming from someone who's been screwing Bryce Morrison for the past 2 months. The silence stretched between us for a long moment. "You knew?" I finally asked. "Danny, everyone knows. The question is what you're going to do about it." "I'm still figuring that out." "Well, while you're figuring, you should know that your wife's best friend act has been getting old for a while now. She's not the person you married." "No," I agreed. "She's not. So maybe it's time to stop being the person she married too." After hanging up, I sat in my office until the sun started setting, thinking about Rachel's words. She was right. I'd been playing the same role for 15 years, the steady, reliable husband who fixed things and kept quiet and never caused any trouble. But maybe trouble was exactly what this situation needed. I locked up the dealership and drove home to our quiet cul-de-sac, where Mrs. Yates was watering her garden and pretending not to watch me pull into the driveway. The house was dark. Samantha was working late again, or at least, that's what she'd want me to think. I made myself a sandwich and settled in front of the computer, opening Facebook to look at the photos from Mom's birthday dinner. Rachel and I looked good together, comfortable in a way that Samantha and I hadn't looked in years. The comments were interesting too. Lots of heart emojis from Mom's friends, several asking where Samantha was, and a few that were clearly fishing for gossip. Such a lovely couple. Danny looks so happy. Is this the same Rachel from high school? She looks amazing. I shared one of the photos to my own timeline, adding a simple caption. "Great night with great company. Thanks for making Mom's birthday special, Rachel." Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tuesday morning brought the first real casualties. I was opening the dealership when my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Samantha's office number. "Castellano's Used Cars," I answered, keeping my voice professionally neutral. "Danny, it's Margie from Samantha's office. Is she with you?" Margie was Samantha's assistant, a sweet woman in her 50s who'd always been kind to me at company parties. The worry in her voice was genuine. "No, she left for work an hour ago. Why?" "She never showed up for her 9 o'clock appointment with the Henderson family. They've been waiting for 45 minutes and she's not answering her phone." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "That's strange. She's usually so professional. I know, that's why I'm worried. This isn't like her at all. I'm sure she'll turn up. Probably just got caught in traffic. But I knew exactly where Samantha was. The Sunset Motel, room 237, same as every Tuesday for the past 2 months. I'd driven by an hour earlier and seen her BMW in the parking lot, along with Morrison's ridiculous lifted truck with its diesel power bumper sticker. The missed appointment would cost her the Henderson sale, a $400,000 house that would have netted her a $12,000 commission. More importantly, it would raise questions about her reliability with her boss, Marcus Webb, who'd been looking for an excuse to cut his sales staff since the market slowdown. Small price to pay for a morning of passion with her muscle-bound boyfriend. I was still smiling when Eddie walked into the dealership around 10. "You look pleased with yourself," he observed, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Just enjoying the morning. Coffee?" "Sure." He accepted the mug I offered and studied my face. "So you decide what you're going to do about your situation?" "I'm taking your advice, thinking before I act." "Good, because Morrison was at the gym yesterday, running his mouth again, talking about how he's going to convince his lady friend to leave her loser husband." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "Is that right? Kid's got no respect, no class. Thinks because he can bench press 300 pounds, he can take whatever he wants." "And what do you think?" Eddie's smile was sharp. "I think he's about to learn that muscle doesn't mean much if you don't know how to use it." "You have something in mind?" "Me? Nah. But if someone were to, say, let slip that Morrison's been dealing steroids out of his shop, well, that's the kind of information the State Athletic Commission might find interesting. Kid's got 3 amateur fighters training with him. They take a dim view of coaches who juice their athletes." I raised an eyebrow. "Is he dealing steroids? Does it matter? Once the investigation starts, they'll find something. They always do." After Eddie left, I sat in my office and considered his suggestion. It was tempting, but it felt too indirect. If I was going to war with Morrison, I wanted him to know it was me pulling the trigger. My phone rang again. This time it was Rachel. "Lunch?" she asked without preamble. "Sure. Where?" "Murphy's. I have something to show you." Murphy's Bar was the kind of place where construction workers grabbed breakfast beers and retirees nursed whiskey while complaining about the government. The lighting was dim, the floors were sticky, and the bartender had been serving the same crowd for 20 years. It was also where Morrison apparently liked to brag about his conquests. Rachel was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a manila folder in front of her. She'd traded her bank attire for jeans and a sweater, looking more like the girl I'd known in high school than the polished professional she'd become. "What's in the folder?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Insurance," she said, opening it to reveal a stack of photographs. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago." I stared at the images spread across the table. Samantha and Morrison entering the motel. Samantha and Morrison at Romano's. Samantha and Morrison at his apartment. The photos were clear, well-lit, and completely damning. "Why?" I asked. "Because I was tired of watching you get played." Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. "And because your wife isn't the only one who's been keeping secrets." She pulled out another set of photos. These showed Morrison with another woman, someone I didn't recognize. Then another set with a third woman. The timestamps showed they were all taken within the past month. "Jesus," I whispered. "Your wife's boyfriend has quite the appetite," Rachel said. 3 regular girlfriends that I know of, plus whatever random hookups he manages at the bars." "Does Samantha know?" "Not yet. But she's going to." I looked up from the photos to study Rachel's face. There was something calculating in her expression, something that reminded me that she'd been the smartest person in our high school class and the only one who'd gone on to get an MBA. "What do you want out of this?" I asked. "I want to watch your wife's world burn," she said simply. "She spent the last 5 years treating you like garbage while pretending to be my friend." She sabotaged my marriage, Danny. Fed my ex-husband information about my finances during the divorce, helped him hide assets. I lost half of what I should have gotten because of her. The pieces started falling into place. Rachel's sudden availability for dinner, her knowledge about Morrison's bragging, her willingness to help me wage war against my cheating wife. So this is revenge, I said. For both of us. She leaned forward. The question is, are you in? I looked at the photos again, at the evidence of my wife's betrayal and her boyfriend's casual cruelty. At 15 years of marriage reduced to a stack of surveillance pictures and timestamps. What did you have in mind? Rachel's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I thought you'd never ask. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We'd wait for the monthly community barbecue at Riverside Park, where half the town would be gathered for food, gossip, and the kind of small-town drama that kept everyone entertained through the long winter months. Morrison would be there. He never missed a chance to show off his physique, and so would Samantha, playing the role of the devoted wife, while her boyfriend flexed for the crowd 20 feet away. It was the perfect stage for a very public humiliation. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made the whole town turn out for community events. I spent the morning at the dealership, making sure everything was locked up tight, then headed home to shower and change. Samantha was already gone, claiming she needed to help set up tables and decorations. More likely, she was coordinating with Morrison to make sure they didn't arrive together. I picked up Rachel at 2, and we drove to the park in comfortable silence. She'd dressed carefully for the occasion. Jeans that showed off her figure, a sweater that brought out her eyes, and just enough makeup to look effortless. If we were putting on a show, she was determined to make it a good one. Nervous? She asked, as we pulled into the crowded parking lot. Excited, I admitted. It's been a long time since I looked forward to one of these things. The park was packed with families, couples, and groups of friends clustered around picnic tables laden with food. A local band was setting up near the gazebo, and kids ran between the adults with the kind of manic energy that only came from too much sugar and fresh air. I spotted Samantha near the drink station, wearing a sundress that was probably too expensive for a community barbecue, but perfectly calculated to draw attention. She was talking to Helen Morrison, the mayor's wife, with the kind of animated enthusiasm she reserved for potential clients. Morrison was exactly where I'd expected to find him, near the grills, holding court with a group of younger guys who were clearly impressed by his stories about his gym and his business. He'd dressed for the occasion, too, wearing a tank top that showed off his arms and shoulders, along with jeans that were probably tighter than anything I'd worn since high school. "There's our target," Rachel murmured, following my gaze. "Both of them." We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with neighbors and accept compliments on the photos from Mom's birthday dinner. Mrs. Yates made a point of telling us how nice we looked together, while her husband nodded approvingly and asked if I was planning to bring Rachel to more community events. "We'll see," I said, putting my arm around Rachel's shoulders. "Depends on how much fun we have today." By 4 o'clock, I'd positioned myself near the beer station with a perfect view of both Samantha and Morrison. Rachel had drifted off to chat with some of her former co-workers from the bank, but I could feel her watching me, waiting for the signal we'd agreed on. Morrison was in his element, regaling his audience with a story about some customer who'd tried to stiff him on a detailing job. His voice carried across the park, loud and confident, full of the kind of swagger that came from never being seriously challenged. "So I told him," Morrison was saying, gesturing with his beer bottle. "You can pay me what you owe, or you can explain to your wife why your car smells like another woman's perfume." The group laughed, and I felt my jaw clench. The casual cruelty of it, the way he talked about destroying someone's marriage like it was a joke, made my hands curl into fists. "Interesting story," I said, stepping into their circle. "You get a lot of customers like that? Guys cheating on their wives?" Morrison's eyes narrowed as he recognized me. We'd never been introduced, but in a town this size, everyone knew everyone else by sight. "More than you'd think," he said carefully. "Must be nice having that kind of leverage over people. Really shows what kind of man you are." The group had gone quiet, sensing the tension crackling between us. Morrison straightened up, using his 3-inch height advantage to try to intimidate me. "You got something to say to me, old man?" "Old man?" I laughed, genuinely amused. "I'm 42, kid. That's not old, that's experienced." "Experienced at what? Selling junker cars to people too stupid to know better?" "Among other things." I took a sip of my beer, keeping my voice conversational. "I'm also experienced at recognizing bullshit when I hear it, like your story about the cheating customer. Sounds to me like you're the one helping guys cheat on their wives." Morrison's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" "See, here's what I think happened. Some married woman starts bringing her car to your shop, maybe flirts a little, makes you feel special. Pretty soon you're convinced you're God's gift to unhappy housewives, so you start making your move. Problem is you're not as smooth as you think you are." The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the spectacle of 2 grown men facing off at a community barbecue. I could see Samantha pushing through the crowd, her face pale with panic. "You're way out of line," Morrison said, his voice rising. "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the kind of guy who thinks he can take whatever he wants. Consequences be damned. The kind of guy who brags about destroying marriages like it's some kind of achievement." "Danny, stop." Samantha had reached us, her voice sharp with warning. "This isn't the place." I turned to look at her, letting my smile widen. "Hey, honey. Just having a friendly conversation with your friend here about the car detailing business. Amazing the stories you hear." Morrison stepped forward, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath and see the steroid acne on his shoulders. "You need to back off, old man. Before you say something you'll regret." "The only thing I regret," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear, "is not doing this sooner." Then I raised my voice so the whole crowd could hear me. "You know what's funny about guys like you, Morrison? You think muscle makes you tough, but really it just makes you slow. You think young makes you smart, but really it just makes you stupid. And you think taking something that doesn't belong to you makes you a man, but really it just makes you a thief." "That's enough." Morrison lunged forward, but I was ready for him. 25 years of boxing training doesn't just disappear because you get older. I sidestepped his clumsy rush, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling into the picnic table behind him. Beer bottles crashed to the ground as he fought to keep his balance. "Danny!" Samantha screamed, but I wasn't done. "Here's some free advice, kid," I said, standing over Morrison as he tried to untangle himself from the collapsed table. "Next time you want to play with someone else's toys, make sure you can handle the consequences." The crowd was silent, everyone staring at the scene we'd created. Morrison's face was purple with rage and embarrassment, his tank top torn and stained with beer. Samantha looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground, and I felt better than I had in months. "Show's over, folks," I announced, straightening my shirt. "Just a friendly disagreement about business practices." I found Rachel near the edge of the crowd, her eyes bright with admiration. "Feel better?" she asked. "Getting there," I said, "but we're not done yet." The fallout from the barbecue incident was swift and brutal. By Sunday morning, half the town had seen cell phone videos of Morrison sprawled among the broken beer bottles, while I stood over him delivering my parting shot. The other half had heard increasingly exaggerated versions of the story, ranging from a simple shoving match to a full-scale brawl that had required police intervention. The truth, as usual, was somewhere in between. But the truth wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was that everyone now knew there was drama brewing between Danny Castellano, his wife, and the muscle-bound idiot who detailed cars for a living. The speculation was delicious, the gossip was vicious, and the sides were already being drawn. I spent Sunday at the dealership, using the quiet to catch up on paperwork and plan my next move. Rachel stopped by around noon with coffee and sandwiches from the deli downtown. "You're the talk of the town," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store called me this morning to ask if you and I were dating." "What did you tell her?" "That it was complicated." She unwrapped her sandwich and studied my face. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected. Samantha didn't come home last night. Probably staying with Morrison, licking his wounds and planning their next move." "Let them plan. I'm done playing defense." Rachel leaned forward, her expression serious. "What are you thinking?" I pulled out the folder she'd given me earlier, spreading the surveillance photos across my desk. "I'm thinking it's time everyone knew exactly what kind of man Bryce Morrison really is, and exactly what kind of wife I've been married to." The nuclear option. The nuclear option. We spent the next hour planning the details. The community center was hosting its monthly town hall meeting on Wednesday night, one of those civic obligations that drew a decent crowd of local business owners, retirees, and anyone else who cared about zoning disputes and budget allocations. It was boring, predictable, and absolutely perfect for our purposes. "You sure about this?" Rachel asked as we finished laying out the timeline. "Once we do this, there's no going back." "I've been thinking about that," I said, "and I realized something. I've spent 15 years trying to save a marriage to a woman who stopped loving me years ago. Maybe it's time to stop saving and start living." Wednesday arrived with a cold rain that matched my mood perfectly. I spent the day at the dealership, going through the motions of running a business, while my mind focused on the evening ahead. Eddie stopped by around closing time, ostensibly to discuss a car he was thinking about buying, but really to check on my mental state. "You seem calm," he observed, walking around a 2018 Toyota Camry that had been sitting on my lot for 6 weeks. "I am calm." "That worries me more than if you were ranting and raving." "Why?" "Because calm Danny is dangerous Danny. I've seen you fight, remember? You never lost your temper in the ring, just waited for your opening, and then destroyed whoever was stupid enough to give it to you." I smiled at the memory. Those were good times. They were simpler times. This is messier. Not for much longer. The community center was about half full when Rachel and I arrived at 7:30. The usual suspects were there. Mayor Henderson and his wife, the city council members, a handful of local business owners, and enough concerned citizens to make the evening feel legitimate. Samantha was sitting in the third row, dressed conservatively and projecting the image of a responsible community member. Morrison was nowhere to be seen. The meeting proceeded with the usual tedium: budget discussions, permit applications, complaints about potholes and snow removal. I sat in the back with Rachel, waiting for my moment and watching Samantha pretend to pay attention to a debate about parking meters downtown. My opportunity came during the open comment period, when Mayor Henderson asked if anyone had issues they wanted to bring before the council. I stood up. "Danny Castellano, Castellano's Used Cars," I said, walking to the front of the room. "I want to talk about business ethics and community standards." Henderson looked puzzled but gestured for me to continue. "Go ahead, Danny." "Thank you, Mayor. I've been a business owner in this community for 15 years, and I've always tried to operate with honesty and integrity. But lately I've become aware of some practices by other local businesses that I think violate the trust our customers place in us." I could see Samantha shifting nervously in her seat, but she couldn't leave without drawing attention to herself. "Specifically," I continued, "I want to talk about businesses that use their access to customers' personal property to facilitate affairs and other inappropriate relationships." The room had gone completely silent. Henderson looked confused, but several of the older residents were leaning forward with interest. "For example," I said, pulling out the first photograph and placing it on the podium, "when a married woman brings her car to be detailed, She should be able to trust that the business owner will maintain professional boundaries. The photograph showed Morrison and Samantha entering the Sunset Motel together. It was clear, well lit, and absolutely damning. "Danny," Henderson said, his voice carrying a warning, "this isn't really appropriate for—" "I think it's very appropriate," I interrupted, placing the second photograph on the podium. "Because when business owners abuse their positions to destroy marriages and families, that affects the whole community." This photo showed Morrison with the second woman, entering his apartment building. The timestamp was from last Tuesday, the same day he'd been with Samantha. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered from the audience. "The question," I continued, placing the third photograph down, "is whether we want to support businesses that operate this way, businesses that treat other people's marriages like a joke." The third photo showed Morrison with the third woman. The timestamp was from yesterday. Samantha had gone completely white. She was staring at the photographs with the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion, unable to look away but horrified by what she was seeing. "Now, I know some people might say this is a private matter," I said, turning to address the audience directly. "But when someone brags about their conquests at local bars, when they use their business to facilitate affairs, when they treat our community like their personal hunting ground, I think that makes it a public concern." I placed the final photograph on the podium. This one showed Morrison at Murphy's bar, surrounded by his usual crowd, clearly in the middle of one of his bragging sessions. This is Bryce Morrison at Murphy's bar last Thursday night, telling anyone who would listen about his latest conquests. Married women, single women didn't matter to him, just trophies to collect and stories to tell. The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. Henderson was banging his gavel, trying to restore order, but nobody was paying attention to him anymore. All eyes were on the photographs and on Samantha, who looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. "That's enough," Henderson finally shouted. "Mr. Castellano, this is not appropriate for a town hall meeting." "You're right," I said, gathering up the photographs. "This is the kind of thing that should be handled privately, between adults. But when those adults choose to make their business public, when they involve the whole community in their drama, sometimes the community needs to respond." I walked back to my seat, leaving Samantha sitting alone in the third row while everyone in the room stared at her. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, but nobody was paying attention to zoning ordinances anymore. They were all focused on the real-life soap opera that had just played out in front of them. Samantha left before the meeting officially ended, walking out with her head down while conversation stopped and started again in her wake. I watched her go, feeling something that might have been pity if it hadn't been overwhelmed by the satisfaction of finally fighting back. "How do you feel?" Rachel asked as we walked to the parking lot. "Like I just won the last round of a very long fight." "What happens now?" I looked up at the rain clouds gathering overhead, then back at the community center where people were still talking about what they'd witnessed. "Now we see how much damage we've done." The answer came faster than I'd expected. By Thursday morning, Morrison's auto detailing shop was closed, with a for lease sign already posted in the window. By Thursday afternoon, Samantha's boss had called to inform her that her services were no longer needed at the real estate agency. By Thursday evening, the moving truck was in our driveway. I watched from the dealership as Samantha loaded her belongings into the truck with the help of two guys I didn't recognize. She worked quickly and efficiently, taking only what was clearly hers and leaving everything else behind. The house, the mortgage, the life we'd built together, all of it abandoned like a rental car at the end of a vacation. She didn't try to talk to me, didn't attempt any final confrontation or tearful goodbye. She just packed her things and left, disappearing from our cul-de-sac as suddenly as she disappeared from our marriage. Rachel found me there at sunset, standing in my empty driveway and staring at the house that was now entirely mine. "Any regrets?" she asked. I considered the question seriously. 15 years of marriage, gone. A woman I'd once loved, destroyed. A community torn apart by gossip and scandal. No, I said finally. No regrets at all. Good, she said, taking my hand. Because I have a proposal for you. Oh? Dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere nice where we don't have to pretend we're just friends helping each other through a rough patch. I looked at her. This woman who'd helped me wage war against my cheating wife, who'd stood by me through the ugliest chapter of my life, who'd reminded me what it felt like to be wanted and respected and valued. Are you asking me on a date, Rachel Morrison? I'm asking you to stop being the victim of your own story and start being the hero instead. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. In that case, yes, I'd love to have dinner with you. As we walked toward the house together, I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Yates watching us from her garden. She waved, and I waved back, knowing that by tomorrow morning the whole neighborhood would know that Danny Castellano was moving on with his life. Let them talk. Let them gossip. Let them speculate about what had really happened and who was to blame and whether justice had been served. I'd spent 15 years being the good husband, the reliable neighbor, the man who fixed things and kept quiet and never caused any trouble. I'd been the victim of my own story for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. But victims don't get happy endings. Victims don't get revenge. Victims don't get to walk away from the wreckage of their old lives and build something better from the ashes. Only villains get to do that. And maybe, just maybe, I was exactly the villain this story needed.